Kia ora everyone, you are listening to Voice of Aroha on frequency 106.1 FM from Wellington, New Zealand. This show is generously supported by our partner and sponsor, Host International NZ, Wellington Access Radio and Changemakers Resettlement Forum. Today our guest is Orphy McCallard, who is running for Prime Minister North City Council. Orphy, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Well, my name is Orphy McCallard and I'm 30 years old. And in 2006, me and my family migrated to New Zealand from the Congo. Civil war caused my family to flee. And we came to New Zealand and then settled in Palmerston North and went to study and all those things. And suddenly decided that I've got a calling, and that calling is public service. So that's what motivated me to run for public service and for council as well. So I'm driven by a strong sense of public service, and I want to make a difference in people's lives. So I thought that public policy is the most potent way to do that or to effectuate change, and that's why I'm running for council. Yeah.
Nice. And when did you arrive to New Zealand, and what was your journey resettling in New Zealand?
I came to New Zealand in 2006, February 2006, so next month it's going to be 15 years actually. And it was my journey. It was very tough because in Congo we speak French and Congolese, and coming to New Zealand with next to zero English language learning skills was quite tough. It meant that I couldn't, really communicate effectively with teachers or even communicate with friends, attend parties, for example, or even mingle with friends, for example, because I always felt not so confident about myself, not knowing the language or how to even communicate or to even request for certain things. And also there are other aspects as well of living in New Zealand as a former refugee, the stigma attached to it as well, and also the way people feel about migrants and refugees in New Zealand. The racism as well is part of it, You hear, the favorite theme song, Go Back to Your Country, or Go Back to Africa used to be the favorite theme song for many people. But, but just being able to assimilate into this new, society and culture, I think that was one of the most challenging one because there's a cultural shift as well to take into consideration in that, the way you perceive the world is not perceived in the same way that, things are perceived in the first world, for example. Also, the cultural values are very different. Back in my days in the Congo, you were not allowed to bring a boyfriend or girlfriend at home, that sort of things. And as a young person, you were not probably also allowed to smoke in front of people, if you were doing it as a kid, it had to be privately, that sort of thing. But coming to New Zealand, it was so liberal, that kids could bring their girlfriends to their parents' house and smoke in front of their parents and even answer, their parents in a rude manner as well, that sort of things. And for me, that was like, whoa, that was a bit of a shock and a bit of a challenge to sort of accept and that sort of thing. But overall, it was very challenging. My high schooling was very tough because it meant that the fact that we came with next to zero English language skills meant that we had to sort of take ESOL classes and do a few years of intensive English learning courses in order to get up to speed with the language and be ready for university as well. And even at university, that was very tough because my English speaking proficiency was not that great as well. And it simply meant that being a French speaker, I had to translate my assignments into French. For example, from French to English, write them in French and then translate them into English to try to make sense. And that took longer. Like a 1,500 words or 2,000 word assignment would take me 3 weeks to write compared to the average student who will probably spend 3 or 5 days on it, that sort of thing, including the research. But yeah, it was a very tough experience. But we got there through hard work and perseverance, and here we are. Now I have a master's degree, so yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's really cool. And Orphy, it's really interesting to see your journey. And I have a question about what make you passionate about politics? Why politics?
Yeah, I think the things that makes me passionate about politics is the fact that you are able to solve people's issues or problems within society. the iniquities or inequalities that are within society. And I do find politics to be sort of the conduit or the avenue for making a positive impact and also negative impact as well, when it comes to public policy, that sort of thing. Like I mentioned earlier, I see public policy like, the laws that the government makes, the policies, the regulations, and all those sort of things to be the most potent form to effectuate change in society. For example, the government decides how much tax you pay, the quality of your education through the policies that they make, that sort of thing, and the opportunities that are made available as well for children, or not just children, but citizens to sort of have access to as well, that sort of thing. So that's what really motivated me. And I told myself one day, I was like, if the government can have such influence upon my life, and I'm thinking to myself that, if they're not doing the right thing, it means that, if I want to be an agent of change, because Barack Obama once said, we are the change we seek. And I think I'm moved by that principle. Like, if I want change, therefore I need to be the change, the force behind the change, or an agent of change. So that's what really motivated me into politics, knowing that public policy was the most effective way to effectuate change. And the only way for me to get to that is through running for public office or having influence on public policy, and that's through politics. Yeah.
It's awesome. It's great. And coming to another question I have in mind, you say you get your master. When did you graduate from?
Yeah. So in 2000, when I finished school, at the end of 2010, I took a gap year and then went to study at Messi University. So I graduated in 2000. My first degree was in 2014. Graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Politics, Social Policy and Development Studies. And then I took a gap year in between again and went to work part-time and trying to make some money to sort of keep myself afloat. And then I went on to do my master's degree, which I completed in 2018, my master's in politics and international relations. And I only graduated for it actually last year because there were some due to COVID-19 and other issues, because I wanted my family to come over as well from Australia, and they were not able to come to New Zealand to attend my graduation. So I kind of postponed it until last year. So yeah, that's what I graduated with. Yeah.
That's cool.
That's really cool. You said you did a master's of both international relations and political science. How does that work? In other universities, you notice that, especially like Victoria University, they have they distinguish politics and international relations. So, but at Messi, they consider international relations to be a component of politics. Yeah. So they just embed it into one program called politics. So within it, you learn political theory, comparative politics, international relations, government, and other theories of political science, that sort of thing. So they combine it all together and just call it politics, that sort of thing. But so I graduated with my master's in politics, but with an international relations endorsement. Yeah. But other universities will do it differently. Yeah. I know Vic does it differently. And Otago, I think, also. And some universities just call it political science. And what made you want to do your master's degree?
To set myself from the rest, myself, aside. I mean, to sort of, I usually move by this slogan as well, which says "Eagles don't flock," sort of thing. So they stand alone, that sort of thing. So I have a very competitive nature as well. So I always want to be distinguished, that sort of thing. So if everybody's getting degrees these days, then I must do something that is more than a bachelor or something. I need to go and do a master's or a PhD, that sort of thing. But personally, it was more of me trying to improve myself and also gain expertise in my area of interest, politics and international relations as well. And so I wanted to be an expert in my field. So I decided, let me go and do my master's degree, and also to improve my job opportunities as well, because having done social policy as well as a major, one of the key requirements to actually get into policy analyst jobs, that sort of thing, is that they want to see that you're able to demonstrate that you have a research background, that sort of thing, and that you've done some sort of higher studies, like, or even have honors honors and that sort of thing. And at the time when I finished my first my bachelor's, that was actually the key requirement. Most of the policy work jobs that I was looking for, because I already wanted to get into policy or become a policy analyst. And one of the requirements, in those jobs were, experience or, at least have a postgraduate sort of degree. So that kind of motivated me as well. It was not the only motivator, but that's one of the key things that motivated me to sort of do my master's. Yeah.
So did you get into the public service after completing your master's?
No, surprisingly enough. Well, when I was actually in the middle of doing my master's, I found a job in Parliament. And I worked in Parliament during the previous administration, the Bill English and John Key administration. So that's when I was working there after I graduated and went on to do my master's. So right in the middle of my master's and writing the thesis, I did get a job in Parliament, and that's when I started working. So I'd like to believe that the job in Parliament actually opened up more doors in the public service than my master's ever did, sort of thing. But it was valuable. I think the master's gave me some skills that are valuable in the job market. Being able to research and handle research and write reports and dissertation and being those sort of things. Like you get a enhanced perspective of things that you would not have otherwise have had if you were still doing undergrad. So research and higher studies actually opens up your mind to a lot of possibilities, that sort of thing. Yeah, like when I did my undergrad, it was mainly essay based. Like you just write an essay about a particular question that you get asked or defend a particular question. But when I wanted to do my master's, he taught me a lot of stuff about research as well. So, having a research topic and, being able to develop a thesis out of a 40,000 word thesis or 25,000 word thesis. It takes a lot of skills to be able to write in that context, and so I do encourage a lot of people to do postgrad studies. So.
And you talk, going back to you talking about your resettlement in New Zealand and how you felt. How was kind of like a journey for you, and especially coming at age 16? How did you then reach a place where you felt like Palmerston North was like your home? And
my second home, yeah. I think because when we came in 2006, the fact that we remained there until I moved out of Palmerston North in 2016, and then had to go back again for this. I think the fact that I remained there for more than a decade sort of made me realize that Palmyra has always been home, that sort of thing, because I belong here. That sense of belonging that you get after spending a long time in a particular place. It will be the same thing, for example, if you go to Australia, you always feel like New Zealand is home, that sort of thing. And that's the same thing as all Palmerston North. So I began to identify myself with the community and the issues that are actually pertinent or relevant to the community as well. So I thought that Palmy had become a part of me, and it's also the sporting culture. You do identify yourself with the sport, the Manawatu Turbos, for example, and that sort of thing. So having spent a bit of time there, makes you realize that, oh man, I actually belong to this community, that sort of thing. It wasn't easy at first because it's way different from back home, because it meant that I had to create new friends, that sort of things, and going to a new school as well where you don't know anybody, that sort of thing, and not being able to trust everybody at first when you first came, because people will be yelling things from the car window when you're at traffic light. But irregardless of that, just being, I think having stayed there for long made me realize, okay, this is home for me, and I'd love to actually retire there one day. Yeah. My dad passed away 5 months ago, actually, and we decided to bury him in Palmerston North because that's actually where we considered to be our home, our second home, where we got the chance to sort of have a new beginning in life, So, yeah.
Great. I have a question.
No, sure.
Yeah. So, Orphy, this is really great. I'm hearing your journey and about different challenges. I see you are a man of challenge, especially translating essays and things from English to French and to make sense and get through to it. So tell us, getting to the most important part now, you're running for the city council First is why City Council, and the question is what you will bring for Palmerston North people.
One of the reasons why I wanted to start with the City Council is because I wanted to get an understanding of the grassroots, and community organizations, and how they operate within the context of policy alongside council, because we have to understand that the council is actually the legislative body of that city. And one of the things that I wanted to do is to customize myself with the issues of Palmerston North and sort of see from that council's perspective, how to deal with those issues, how do we deal with this issue, and how do we also work with stakeholders and community organization, that sort of thing. And that's one of the things that motivated me to start with council first, before I even consider going at, going at a national level, that sort of thing. I needed to start from, the grassroots, understanding how local government works before I probably, go into central government, or should I be given the opportunity to get into central government, for example? But that's not the focus. I think it's just, being able to make sure that, the community, that you're from, that just helping out the community where you're from. You identify the issues that are, the challenges that Palmerston North faces, for example. Like, I've been able to identify some of the challenges like housing, homelessness, that sort of thing, and the need for more housing and for council to create more land to build residential homes and that sort of thing, on infrastructure, economic development, or the environment, for example. The Manawatu River, which just runs, within Palmerston North, is considered one of the dirtiest rivers in New Zealand. So it's those things that sort of like make you want to say, okay, before I can even go anywhere else or try to solve anybody's issues, I need to start with my own sort of city and make a positive impact. So that's why I wanted to start with local council, just to solve my local issues. But I'm sure, of course, you get a bigger say and a bigger influence when you get into like central government, because you're able to get central government funding for that as well. But yeah, I think that's what motivated me, just being able to serve my community at a local level first before I can think of anything else.
I think that's great. I think sometimes people get too kind of preoccupied with what's happening with the rest of the world, and then it seems like such a big problem you can't solve it, then you ignore it. When in reality there's probably a lot more problems in your own backyard that you need to solve, and you do have the ability to solve them once you get involved. So that's great that
Yeah, and it's not just at council level, through community organizations. There are lots of community organizations out there, the Migrant Skilled Network, the Refugee Migrant Network as well. The Red Cross is running a lot of community programs as well. And there are so many community organizations that one person can actually get involved and actually effectuate change in as well. But it also depends on, the structures of the organization as well, because, that can be a stumbling block to progress sometimes. But yeah, you can make change without even getting into positions of power as well. Yeah, I think our calling may be different. For me, it's through public office, and for somebody it might be through activism, that sort of thing. So yeah.
Cool. That's really great. And all, if you want to ask, do you have a specific area of policy like you will be interested in City Council if you get elected, like specifically area or?
Yes, I'm very passionate about education. So education will be one of the key major areas for me personally. The Palmerston North Manawatu region has got one of the lowest rates in terms of like youth or young people finishing level 3 at school, that sort of thing. So I would love to get into that portfolio to encourage young people to strive for further education, or to sort of get out of, to be engaged and active at school in order to become an active global citizen and responsible global citizens, that sort of thing. It doesn't mean that you have to go through university, that sort of thing, because not many people are called for that. Some people are better off being, going through vocational training and that sort of stuff, like trades. But I think education is the foundation to any meaningful sort of living in the 21st century. It is the key, actually. You might not, you might be somebody who doesn't probably need education because you probably have a lot of money, and you just tell yourself, okay, I've got a lot of money, I don't need education. But it is, literacy and numeracy is very important, and also learning sort of like social skills. And I'm very much appreciate what the Ministry of Education is doing with the refresh of the curriculum, NCA and those sort of things, to also make sure that they're including stuff like well-being and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's very good. And also housing. I've got a big passion in housing. Over the last few months, we've been noticing that house prices have been going up very high. In Palmerston North alone, we experienced 11.5% growth in terms of house, prices. So it grew by 11.5. House prices grew by 11.5% in the last 6 months, which is ridiculous. And which also increases homelessness and makes it very hard for first-home buyers to sort of get into the housing, owning later or property later, that sort of thing. So I'd love to get those two areas, to be involved in those two areas. Yeah.
That's great. Interesting about housing. What's your plan? What's the solution you will bring? It'd be tough now, even the new administration. Thinking about it, but it will be great, from your experience. Do you have any thoughts about it?
Yes, I do believe that the solution to the housing crisis is simple. It's simple economics, supply and demand. If you have the supply that meets demand, you see that house prices will come down and there will be an equilibrium, that sort of thing. But in order for more houses to get built, you need to get councils to agree on consent, process and that sort of thing. So I think the council has a good and great role to play in making sure that more houses get built, because they determine, what land is appropriate for residential use, that sort of thing, and what land to free up for more building, for development, that sort of things as well. And the council does play a big role in that as well. So that's what I'll be advocating on as well. I'm just making sure that we are working in partnership with central government and relevant community groups to sort of make sure that more houses get built, and streamlining the consent processes and make it easier for more houses to get built. I think there's a simple solution to that.
Yeah, I think I read in your one of your policies, one of your goal is to get young people to interact more with politics. So how do you think, how are you going to approach that?
I do think that. I do believe that for more young people, I want young people to get engaged, to be engaged in politics. I want young people to run for office. Actually, I want young people to be out there, to be, the solutions and the solution providers in society. If you look at most of our councils and also most of our government offices, it's just full of, old, white men. Who are, making decisions on our behalf, young people, and who do not even take into considerations, for example, our perspective in relation to climate change, which is a big issue. It won't affect them once they're dead, but it will definitely affect us in the future. I'm not even 40 years old, but in 20 years from now, most of those people will probably be dead by now, but I'll be living. My children will live here as well. So I want to see young people connecting more with local body politics as well, and also national politics, and being engaged and involved and active citizens. And one way I think that will be that can be done is through opening up avenues for young people to have a voice, sort of thing. And the more actually you get young people involved in having their say, the more they get actually interested into politics and actually the issues that are happening within the community. Because when we shut those avenues, it's actually very hard for them to sort of be like come to the decision table, because they only think, politicians are this, politicians like that, politicians, they don't hear us, they don't do this. But if we open up an avenue to say, come to the table, talk to us on issues that are important to you, and give us the solutions, because I do believe that young people are switched. And especially in the 21st century, we live in a world, information era, whereby anything can be found at the tip of a finger, that sort of thing. And I do want to see young people get involved, and one way of doing that is through encouraging them to get involved and opening up those avenues for them to get involved. And I do believe that for them to be very interested into politics, there needs to be some sort of diversity in terms of culture and also age on the decision-making table. Like, for example, if I get into, let's say, council, and parliament, for example, and to see a young, vibrant young person, being out there, that will also motivate the other younger person to do that. Like one person who motivated me to actually stand up for council at a very young age was Chloe Sobrick. When I saw her standing up for the Auckland mayoralty, I think 4 or 5 years ago, that actually motivated me. I was like, oh wow, if she can do that at 21 or 23, whatever her age was at the time, I was like, it's possible, because I was probably thinking to myself, I'll do this probably when I'm 35, 40 with a wife and probably 4 or 5 kids by then. But just seeing a young person like that just going really hard and making a positive impression and positive impact on the political scene, kind of motivated me, and I was like, wow, I'd love to do that as well. Let me prepare myself, for that thing.
Inspires you, yeah.
It inspires. It definitely inspires. I've met a lot of young people as well, that I've seen who say, oh man, you're the guy running for council. Yes, that's me. And it's like, oh man, it's very inspiring. I think we need more young people to get on, get in there, and more people are actually getting engaged now in local politics in Palmerston North, because they see a young face, for example, like me. Like, oh yeah, we're backing you, we'll come and help you, that sort of thing. So, they want to see somebody that looks like them. They want to see somebody, that talks like them. They don't want to see somebody telling them what to do. They want somebody who can tell them, come to the decision table. Tell me what your issues are and how can I solve them? Not for me to develop a bunch of policies and then shove it down their throat and say, this is what I think you need, that sort of thing. So, yeah.
It's great.
We really appreciate the time that you took to come here and talk to us and share your vision for City Council. Was there if there's anything else that you'd like to share?
Yes, I will ask you. It's really another question about diversity. So you talked about diversity and how important it is, especially for the city like Palmerston North. It's I think a diverse city. So how important is you standing for this candidate? And plus, another questions for you. How are you dealing with now you being in the public, phase, and you may get critics, you may get hate, you may get different kind of comments. How you deal with that, and especially in this age, you being a young person, you may deal, hundreds of comments, maybe people in Facebook or other social media. So what's your advice in there?
Sure. I'll start with the first question. I value Palmy growing diversity. That's number one. Palmy is actually more diverse than Auckland. Did you know that? We have 130 ethnicity living in Palmerston North, and more than 150 languages being spoken in Palmerston North. Palmerston North is actually a refugee resettlement hub as well for the Manawatu-Wanganui region. It means that of the 1,200 refugees that the New Zealand government takes, the intake of refugees that they take per year, a large majority of them actually come to Palmerston North. So we got Bhutanese community, Afghani community, Iraqi community, Palestinian community, Syrian community as well, that sort of thing. So it's growing and it's becoming more and more diverse. Now the thing is, I would love to see more of those groups being involved in not just in local bodies, but just in the community as well, and making sure that Palmerston North is a safe environment for them. And also, in relation to your second question, like how do I deal with those sort of issues? Yes, I do get a lot of those. I do get a lot of people come on, jump online, say nasty things, such as, why don't you go back to your own country? Why don't you go and help your own people, that sort of thing. And but little do they know that, I consider New Zealand to be my second home. The reason why I cannot go home is because the political environment is not suitable, that sort of thing. So I've learned to deal with it politely. It's best to shame those people rather than for you shame them in a positive way, in the sense that if they get rude to you, you answer them in a very professional way. Because if you dare to answer them in a way that is not well perceived by the public, you're going to be seen in a different light, and that gives a bad reference to other refugees or migrants that are coming behind you. So I did get a lot of people like that who have insulted me, said nasty things. Some have even dropped letters in my letterbox to tell me nasty things, for example. And some are removing my signs, deliberately removing my signs, tearing them apart, that sort of things. But one thing that I've always remembered is that, the forces, that binds us are stronger than the forces, that are working against us. And there are a lot of good people in the community who actually stand up to racism and that sort of thing. And it's just a matter of just being positive about it and being able to respond to it in a positive manner. that will actually put shame on them. And so I've learned to simply, respond to them in a positive way and professional way. And when other people see it, oh, how is he responding to this difficult question or to this difficult person? And then they see the way that you respond, and they can actually stand up for you. Because if you start venting and ranting, you're like, oh, here we go, we knew it. He's that type of person, and we already have enough stigma around us or upon us, that sort of thing. So we don't want to put any more stigma on top of us. So yeah, just being able to respond to them in a positive way, and also developing a tough skin. Politics is a bloodbath, and it's a blood sport. And I'm black, and I'm not white, and you're not white. And of course, we are going to be seen in a different light sometimes. And many people, especially in the minority, will come to us and say all sorts of nasty things. I wish I could tell you that, this will not be the case anymore, but it will be. And sometimes it will even get worse, especially with the advent of Donald Trump and that sort of thing, and white supremacy, and also we saw the Christchurch attack of March 15, that sort of thing. And some of the hate, it was buried under the carpet, but now we are seeing it with the advent of like Donald Trump, legitimizing the far right and that sort of things. And yeah, I wish I could tell you like those things will stop. Unfortunately, no, it will continue, but we'll get there.
Having such a voices, I think, in the city council or parliament is important for ethnic groups to be raising, so we can have a better society. We are coming to the end of this session, 2 more minutes. Team, if you have another question, or so we can give the last words to you, your message to the audience, and to you, the one who can vote for you. What's your last message?
Any questions? No questions. Oh, okay. No, nice.
Yeah, you have 2 minutes to go.
2 minutes to go. All right, let's go. All right, I'm Orfemi Khaled, and I'm running for public office and for Palmerston City Council. And I would love for you to make me your number 1 choice at the upcoming City Council by-election. One of the reasons because I'm running because I'm driven by a strong sense of public service, and I'd love to see Palmy become a thriving city where people can come, visit, and not just visit, but also live and thrive. I'm running to make Palmerston North a vibrant, innovative, and growing city. And also, a vote for me will mean a vote for me will send a passionate, practical, and solution-focused councillor at the council table. Also, Palmy is a growing city, and I value Palmy's growing diversity. A vote for me will also send someone at the council table who can value cultural diversity and have cultural awareness and bring those to the table. Also, you also notice that throughout the course of my campaign, I've been able to go out in the community and talk to people on issues that are important to them. Should you wish to probably, get to know more about me or my policies, you can always visit orfemikhaled.com. I do have a range of policies there that are available for you to look and check out. And if they resonate with you, I'd love to get your number 1 pick.
Hi, and welcome back to Voice of Aroha. Today we have a very special guest with us today. It's Bilal from Auckland. Bilal is currently doing his PhD in clinical psychology about youth and their effects of March 15 attacks. I'm not going to say too much because I'm going to let him talk more about himself.
Kia ora. Thank you so much for having me on. So, ko waio, who am I? No Afghanistan aho. So I'm originally from Afghanistan. Ko Bilal Tukuingwa. And my name's Bilal, Bilal Nasir. I'm 26 years old and completing, as you said, Khadru, my doctorate in clinical psychology at the University of Auckland. So that's kind of what takes up most of my time. And my thesis is on looking at how the March 15th attacks impacted upon young Muslims in Auckland and what they did to kind of cope with what was such a incomprehensible tragedy in the wake of those attacks. What young Muslims did to be able to cope.
Yeah, that sounds like some amazing work that you're doing. I know the March 15 attacks had a profound effect on every single Muslim in this country. I know it hit me very, very hard. So the work you do is very, very important and much needed. So I can understand you a bit better, and for the viewers along, how long have you been in New Zealand? When did you come here, and what made you get into clinical psych?
So yeah, my family came here in 1999. We came here as asylum seekers, which is, I guess, a category of refugees, or we fall under the category of refugees. So we didn't necessarily come here through the quota system. We came as asylum seekers. So my parents more or less paid human traffickers a whole bunch of, all of their savings, and they produced fraudulent documents and got us out of Afghanistan, which just broke out in civil war. And we ended up here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. So it was about 4 months that it took us to go from Afghanistan to Aotearoa. We went through Malaysia, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, Australia, Singapore, before we finally ended up here. And at the time I was 4 years old, I had no idea what was going on. And I just kind of went along with whatever my parents were telling me to do and say. And so myself, my 2 older brothers, and my parents, alhamdulillah, safely we made it from Afghanistan to here in one piece. So having kind of gone through that at a really, really young age, and then kind of dealing with the consequences of having arrived with practically nothing but the clothes on our backs and maybe 1 or 2 suitcases, and really starting from scratch to build our lives. That kind of put me down this trajectory, I think, of life experiences and situations I found myself, and I guess this identity that was kind of being shaped around me, around who I was and my place here in Aotearoa. All of these kinds of things led to me to where I am now, and studying psychology. I kind of fell into it by accident. I wanted to study medicine and become a doctor like my father. I did terribly in my first year of university, felt like dropping out. And then I thought, you know what, I've already spent 1 year at uni, why not try and stick this through, but let me change majors. And so I changed to psychology. I really enjoyed it, which meant I did well. I did much better than I was doing in the pre-med papers. And then, I kind of continued on with it. And I discovered clinical psychology, and I thought that's kind of the path I want to take. And so that's where I've ended up. And I guess as I kind of get asked this question around what made me want to study clinical psychology, I kind of say it's all of these life experiences, but also I really enjoy talking to people and hearing people's stories, getting to know people from different walks of life and that kind of thing. And I think as I was growing up, and even till now, one of my biggest, passions is hip hop music, and the storytelling and the deeply personal elements of hip hop. And so in some ways that too has kind of influenced me wanting to study psychology, because I find parallels in listening to people's story within a therapy room versus listening to an album and hearing someone kind of describe the trials and tribulations that they've kind of gone through. So it's a whole bunch of life experiences, hip hop, my parents, all of this stuff kind of has led me, and of course the March of 15th attacks too. It kind of just really solidified my reasons for why I'm studying what I'm studying, and I kind of got to see the big gap that there was in terms of the support available, mental health support available, that was culturally relevant and appropriate for Muslim communities. So that's just a whole bunch of things that's made me want to study this.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's so cool. One thing I noticed when you first started talking about your clinical psych stuff and your research, and when you said something about cultural sensitivity, is I think it's quite a niche, and I don't know many Muslim immigrant psychologists, unfortunately, and I don't think psychology meshes very well with people from ethnic backgrounds, because I know even talking about your emotions is hard. So what's some of the biggest barriers you've faced, do you think, in some of your research?
I push back against that idea around we don't talk about psychology, or we don't talk about mental health within ethnic communities or within Muslim communities. I can't speak for every ethnic community, but I say that because I think there's different ways that we conceptualize mental health or mental well-being that isn't necessarily in Western terms. Speaking specifically from an Islamic perspective, the simple act of praying 5 times a day is what you could describe as, mindfulness, which has become this hugely popular routine or kind of this thing that people do in their everyday lives now is practice mindfulness, where you meditate. But as a Muslim, we do that 5 times a day. And while I guess the central tenet is to give praise and thanks to Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala, the other, I guess, the added benefit to that is you have 5 times a day where you're, you cut off from everything else around you. You're in the state of literal meditation and prayer. And so in itself, it serves to benefit your mental health in that way. So yeah, I push back against the idea that we don't talk about it. We might not talk about it in explicit terms, but it's kind of embedded in our cultural or religious practices day to day. That's not to say that stigma doesn't exist or barriers don't exist. I mean, looking at what happened following the March 15th attacks, as you've said, Khadr, there are very, very few Muslim psychologists. There's a handful, and I'm lucky enough to kind of know them, and they were really, really overwhelmed with the amount of work that was kind of that they had to do, because if there were more Muslim psychologists available, they would be able to provide more culturally appropriate support, mental health support to a whole bunch of people that needed it. But unfortunately, there wasn't, and it kind of fell on the shoulders of this 5 or 6 psychologists who are doing so much of the legwork. So on the one hand, yeah, there's a real need for more Muslim psychologists or psychologists just generally trained in being able to deal with people of different religious or ethnic backgrounds. On the other hand, I think, yeah, there exists certainly barriers, or there's stigma within various communities around talking about mental health and the need to seek support. I don't think we're unique in having those issues or those barriers, because when you look at mainstream New Zealand society, a lot of those things still exist, which is why we have such heavy promotion around mental health awareness weeks and suicide prevention, and that it's okay to not be okay kind of promotion. So those issues aren't necessarily unique to Muslim communities, but sometimes there are unique factors that come into play, or the way we kind of conceptualize mental health is a little bit different. Or when we conceptualize mental ill health, or when people aren't doing so well, how we conceptualize that is a little bit different to how maybe mainstream society does. But yeah, those things certainly exist, and I am an advocate for all of us talking more about how we're doing mentally and seeking support when we need it.
Awesome. That is so cool. Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. We aren't, Muslims aren't unique in their, what's the word? Lack of emotional intelligence. So yeah, I agree with that. You've mentioned some work, you're doing a lot of work around March 15 attacks, and you said there aren't many Muslim psychologists. So is that a huge challenge you faced during your research? And
yeah, I mean, there's a part of the research is kind of drawing on literature from around the world, where other Muslim psychologists and psychiatrists and counselors have kind of produced research and looking at the experiences of Muslims in terms of their mental well-being. So there is a bit of stuff to draw on from overseas, and there are some psychologists from New Zealand who've done some amazing work around that. But compared to other populations, it's really, really limited. So given what has happened and kind of the needs we'll start to see over the next, 2, 3, 10 years in terms of the needs for Muslim people particularly, there's certainly a lot of gaps in our knowledge and also in our practice too, in being able to provide culturally relevant and appropriate support. I mean, there's only so many Muslim psychologists, so the onus is on non-Muslim psychologists to be more competent or increase their competency in being able to deal or, effectively provide support to people who are Muslim and what things are most important to them and how to navigate some of the areas around their religious needs or cultural needs. So yeah, certainly it is an issue. And it's a challenge for me trying to research this topic or kind of produce an original piece of work around what Muslim young people have gone through and what they did to get support. but I think that's kind of also driving me to want to do this because no one else has done it. And so it's kind of this, I guess, motivation for me to be able to do this research and do it well so that we do know what young people who are of Muslim backgrounds need and what support looks like to them. Because from where I stand, I think the effects of the March 15th attacks are going to be ongoing, and it's already compounding previous traumas that, being a young Muslim living in the West, you kind of experience or vicariously, experience through your parents or through those around you. So the needs are there, and I hope to be able to, maybe shed some light on what we can do as a society and as psychologists and as people who know and interact with Muslims, help to support one another.
Bilal, that's great to hear what you're doing. I have a question, maybe it's one or two questions too. It's firstly to ask you about how important it's someone like you who have a lived experience of a journey coming from Afghanistan to here being asylum seekers and now studying something psychology. How important it's someone like you to have a lived experience of resilience and how that rules will be important in New Zealand society. And the second one, it's about, your thesis is focusing about youth experience, especially the one with after 15th of March. So the question is, why youth, and that's different between the well-being and looking that's more about the youth or older generations? Yeah.
For your first question in terms of the importance of lived experience. So yeah, I'm like many others. I'm a proponent of placing lived experience at the forefront of what we do, because the people who have kind of gone through these various experiences or belong to racial or ethnic or migratory identities, they know best of what's going to work for them and what they need. So I don't claim to be an expert in anybody else's lives. So really, what as people, as researchers, as professionals, what's really important is to place that lived experience at the forefront and do that in a authentic and meaningful way, not as an afterthought, but really start from there and work your way out. Because oftentimes I think what can happen is we tend to think we know better than the person themselves what support they need. I'll go off on a bit of a tangent, but after I finished my undergraduate degree, I spent a few years working in refugee resettlement with young people who had recently arrived. And, there's an element there are things that they may know that they want to do and see and achieve. But there's also probably things that they aren't aware of either. And so kind of what I see my role is, and what I saw my role to be there was, really to place that person and their lived experience at the forefront, but also guide them or provide them with kind of a smorgasbord or kind of a platter of, here are all of the other options that you might not necessarily be aware of. But at the end of the day, you're the expert and you make the decision around what's going to be best for you. So rather than kind of trying to take this role where I assume to know better than that person, then, like I said, there might be things that they are not aware of or things they don't know about. And so really what I saw my job to be was to kind of present them with those options, but at the end of the day, allowing them to make that call for themselves. And then that comes down to a whole lot of things, whether it comes to, if it's issues around race, if it's issues around gender, the people who are kind of experiencing these things or live with these identities, they are who we need to listen to. And while I might be a researcher in a particular topic, it doesn't give me, or, my learned or my studied knowledge on the topic doesn't necessarily give me priority over someone who's had to go through it. So yeah, I'm definitely a proponent of that. In terms of your second question around why I particularly chose to look at the experiences of young people following March 15th, and that was for several reasons. So following the attacks, myself and the other Muslim psychologists were running various workshops within Christchurch, but also in other parts of the country as well, here in Auckland. We did some in Hamilton. And what we were kind of seeing was that there was a whole lot of support and enthusiasm from parents, around wanting to get out and get help, or just, you know, meet new people or kind of just talk to other people. But actually, there was a big chunk of people, and that was young people, and they weren't necessarily coming along to these sessions, or they weren't as actively participating. And that was for a variety of reasons, whether it was, you know, they didn't necessarily have the means to get there, or they felt like the session wasn't going to be most helpful to them. But basically, we weren't meeting that need for young people. I'm also biased in the sense that I've got a background in youth work. I'm relatively young myself at 26 years old. So I wanted to see what other young people kind of did, or how they experienced or made meaning of the March 15th attacks. Because, you know, as young people, we kind of tiptoe this, I guess, this fine line between being a Muslim and then, but also living in a Western society. And we often find ourselves in situations or in contexts where we're kind of trying to negotiate those two identities, and sometimes they're at quite you know, conflicting ends with each other. Sometimes they complement really well, and sometimes you can kind of mesh the two. But yeah, it's kind of this tiptoeing act on this tightrope, if you will, between these two cultures. So while older people don't, it's not to say that they don't quite have the same experience, they do. But for young people, with you know, those in high school or universities or just out and about in mainstream society, there is quite a lot of tension and pressure upon young people, young Muslims, to be trying to navigate these two worlds. You know, wanting to fit into mainstream society yet hold on to Muslim values, wanting to appease their parents, but also wanting to appease peers and be accepted. So you know, it's a common experience amongst various young people, and within the literature, what I've found so far is that, you know, this is particularly pertinent for young Muslims because of their identities and because of kind of notions around what it means to be a Muslim and misconceptions around that. So that's kind of what led me to wanting to see what it was that young people went through, and what we can do to better support them. Again, I want to emphasize that it's not to say that other people or other age groups' experiences don't matter. They certainly do. My particular area of interest or my bias is with young people, and I want to be able to do what I can to support them effectively.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that. Just because I'm a little bit interested myself, but besides the obvious, what else do you plan to get out of this research? And how do you think a lot of the research that you're finding after the March 15 attacks are going to change the landscape and how, as Muslims, we interact with others? And I don't know many people who do PhDs. So.
Well, what I hope to see is, so I've purposely chosen to look at the experiences of young Muslims in Auckland and people who have no connection in terms of familial connections or didn't know anyone personally who was affected or in either of the two masjids or mosques at the time of the attacks. And that was quite a deliberate choice in the sense that what I wanted to kind of highlight was that the impacts, as you've kind of already said, everyone felt the impacts and they felt it in different ways. And I think there's no doubting the fact that people who were in the center of the tragedy or who lost direct family members or who saw what happened would be experiencing the traumatic after events or consequences of that event. But I think people or society don't, you know, there's not necessarily an equal recognition that people who are further away from the attacks would be feeling it in the same way. I know, speaking from personal experience, I felt that I didn't personally know anybody who, any of the Shahada or those who passed away in the attacks, but you know, I felt this immense sense of grief when I found out about it, and actually for a month afterwards, I was in a state of grieving, and it only took me, you know, it took me a month after the attacks to finally realize what I was going through was this process of grief. And it was quite an interesting experience because I felt like, you know what, I didn't actually know anyone who passed away, but simply my connection to them and being a Muslim made me feel like I lost direct family members in that attack. And I guess it speaks to this concept of the Ummah, or, you know, as Muslims being united by this this identity as a Muslim. And so I found that personally in myself, that was quite an interesting experience I was going through. And I wondered whether that was kind of similar for other Muslim youth. And what I found was, yeah, that's kind of, that spoke to their experiences too, that they too were kind of having these experiences of grief without necessarily knowing anyone who was there. So what I hope to be able to achieve from this is to show people that terrorism or acts of terrorism don't necessarily affect the direct targets only, but actually there's kind of this ripple effect to everyone else who has some kind of connection with those who are at the center of tragedy. Again, there's in no way to minimize or kind of discredit what people who are in those mosques went through. And there's a research project being done on that group of people, but I also kind of wanted to highlight what other Muslim youth were kind of going through around the country. So I've selected Auckland for the sake of the fact that I live here, but also because it's quite far from Christchurch, to kind of show that, Muslims were grieving and it impacted them, and it may have re-traumatized some people that might have brought things up from the past. So that's kind of what I hope to achieve from it. In terms of changing the landscape, I don't know, I want to be hopeful and say that it does change the landscape in some ways, that it's this pivotal piece of research, but that's probably me being quite optimistic. I don't know whether anyone's going to read this 50,000 word thesis and really appreciate it, but what I hope to be able to do is just inform those who provide support to young people, whether it's counselors, whether it's psychologists, whether it's just other Muslims around, what we can do to best support one another.
That's so awesome. And firstly, I would definitely read your thesis. So just putting it out there. But I remember just following the attacks after March, I had a lot of conversations with a lot of my friends. I live in Wellington, and I explained it perfectly. I had like a gaping hole in my chest, I guess you could say, with them. I did feel like I lost a lot of my own loved ones, and I say it again, like the effects of March 15 were so profound, and I know many people in Australia as well are very similar to how we're feeling, because I think it was so close to home and we didn't expect it. So I guess my next question to you would be, is there anything unexpected that you've found the research has shown you, anything that took you a little bit off guard, anything particularly interesting?
Well, so for full disclosure, I haven't yet begun to interview young people officially. So 2 weeks ago, I got final approval from the ethics committee to begin the research. So over the past year, I've kind of been developing the methods and doing all the literature review and applying for ethics approval. And I just got it 2 weeks ago. So I haven't started interviewing anyone, and so I don't have any data to go off. I can't start to make those claims around unexpected things. There's some things I'm expecting to see, and I hope to be surprised or have some unexpected things come up in the research, which will hopefully make it more interesting. At the stage, I can't report on anything yet.
Yeah, I really hope so too, and I'm sure that you'll find some amazing data there. I guess the final question I have for you is there any bits of advice you'd give to, say, young refugee migrants who, I don't know, maybe not want to study psychology, but want to study or do things with their life?
Right, no, I don't know who would want to study psychology. It's very, no interest. No, I don't mean that. I think my piece of advice would be to really find what you're passionate about and pursue that. And it might not necessarily be what you originally think is going to be your passion or the kind of the career trajectory you're going to go down, or it might not be necessarily what your parents expect of you. But for me, I've been at university for about 7 years now, and I've got 2 more years to go. I couldn't have put up with university for this long if I wasn't passionate about what I did. So I think it's really important to find something that you're interested in, that you kind of pour your heart into, and when you do that, it doesn't necessarily feel like work or doesn't feel like study, because you're doing something that you're engaged in. And really, the what they say in New Zealand, the world's your oyster. So there's no limit to what you can and can't do, because the opportunities are there, and I think it's about taking up those opportunities. And within my cohort, I'm the only former refugee young Muslim person. So it's not necessarily something that all Muslims do, or all young refugees go do, is do a doctorate in clinical psychology, but there's no reason why you can't be the first to do that. So you can forge your own path and see what other people have done, and kind of see what you can do better or how you can do things differently.
That's great, Bilal. Thank you. We are coming to the end of the show. The last 2-3 minutes is left. Firstly, would love to thank you so much for being a lovely guest to our show. It was so much great and richness that discovering, talking to you about what kind of work you do in Auckland, that it's very crucial work you are doing, and hopefully will go well. And we would love to one day, once you finish, we maybe come back again to an interview and see what kind of reactions will be in the community. Okay, so we are coming to the end of the show. We'll give you 1 minute if you want to say something. If not, we can close it.
Cool. Thank you so much for reaching out and having me on. I wasn't aware of Voice of Aroha until you reached out, Khadro, but I think it's amazing that there's a radio station dedicated to amplifying and centering former refugee and migrant stories. So yeah, I feel so honored and privileged to have been able to be a guest on your show.
Thank you so much for making the time to come out as well. I really appreciate it.